Good day, everybody. It's Greg Schnell, and this is a holiday edition of Market Buzz. I'm out of the office, so I thought I'd work through some timeless stuff that'll help you use the website a lot more. So let's jump into it. First of all, we're going to cover off chart attributes today. Chart attributes are how you do all the settings for the data itself, and I'm going to cover that off. So we're going to work through all the unique chart attributes, getting fluent with range settings, bar, gap, and extra. What do those funny words mean? And I'll be able to help you with that. Understanding the chart type, opacity, and legends. Those are obviously one of the biggest variables. Some people like candlesticks, some people like other types of charts. So we're going to cover those off. Affect the size, shape, color, and background of these charts. And then volume settings is a unique one that you can change, and I want to show you how to do that. And then using the checkmark boxes to make your data show up a little bit better. So let's get into it because there's lots to cover off, and I want to speed through this. Okay, so first of all, I've set my charts short so that we can see this chart attributes area at the bottom. But the point I want to cover off here is periods. All of these different periods are available as a pro member, and then if you have smaller service levels, then you'll have a more restricted diet here on these choices. But I think everybody gets the different sorts of range settings. And what I want to point out on these range settings, so fill the chart, what that does is it gives you these three choices: bar, gap, and extra. And what bar does is it sets the width of the bar in terms of pixels, and then the gap sets the space between them. So if I do that, just watch in the bottom here, and then when we spread that out, that's going to move it over quite a bit. And what it did, it actually expanded the distance between each of these bars. And by doing that, it said, I can fit less data on the page. So that's what the fill the chart setting does. Whatever you've set these settings at, it will adjust it. So if I narrow the bars to 5 and I leave the gap at 5, and hit update. Now what you can see is I've made these candles quite a bit narrower, and so you could set them at whatever you like. But in general, what you're trying to do is get the data to stand out. And then over here, this extra bars, this accumulates the space over here on the right. So you might want to put arrows or comments over here as you're annotating the chart. Now, if I set this to 25, just to be radical, that's going to open up a lot more space over here. So all of these settings are really nice, but the one thing that you need to understand for the most part is if you have a particular chart size you like 1 year of data, then you'll want to set up your fill the chart bar data, maybe it's 5 and 3 or 5 and 1, and then with that just check and see how much data you get, and then you can fine tune that to make sure that it goes back. And in this case, I'm on a 1 hour chart, so that didn't really work. Let's go to daily and check out the update. And this takes you back to February, so you'd need to make your bar size a little bit smaller. And by doing that, that'll bring more data onto the chart. So here we are, 11 days. So a bar 3 and a bar 1 would get you there. And that's going to give you your 1 year of data. So those are just different settings, again, on how the chart is displayed. Now there is a couple of really smooth ones in here. So predefined range, what does that mean? You can go and pick the actual years, days, months. So you can say 1 year, and it's going to massage the chart to maximize that look. And so you can always select that option. The next choice down here, obviously you can pick all of these different year levels, and then if you're a pro level, you have all the way up to 100 years. Lower service packages have a little bit of restriction on the amount of history. Okay, now we're going to take this and we're going to work with the select start and end. And what we want to do on select start and end is show how this particular tool works. And the idea behind this tool is that you've got a little range finder here, and you can slide this back and forth and you can move it. Now this is from 2017 to 2018 as this window shows, and you can change the left edge and the right edge of the chart. One of the important features here is if you wanted to walk through a chart or bar by bar, this allows you to do that. So you just click the little arrow here and you can walk through. And it's based on wherever this was stopped. So if I come all the way to today, this sets it. And you can also manually go in here and just change the start date. Just type in what you like. And that's going to give you a range. Now, I'm just going to go back and pick roughly 1 year here. And what you see on this what I want to get, I guess it's 2018, isn't it? What I want to get here is that you've got your data set up, but the idea behind the select, start, and end helps you a lot to be able to control it. So let's say you want 1 year of data and that's all you want to see. And the advantage to that, of course, would be that you could check and see if you're at new 52-week highs. So you could either use that with 1 year up here, or you could select year to date as an example and just say how much has this improved from year to date. And by doing that, it will take it back to January. Now, you might want to see how much the percentage has changed in this particular stock year to date. And so the candlestick doesn't really help you with that, but the scale over here is in dollars. So what you'd like to do is move the scale over here from candlesticks, and we want to make it a performance chart. And the idea behind the performance chart is that it will put it in a percentage, and the idea behind this percentage is that you can see very quickly how much it's gained. And if you know the price that you paid for the stock, you could go in and enter that as the start date. So let's say it was May the 1st, you bought it, you can go in and hit done, and now it's going to calculate the percentage gain from May the 1st. You'll notice that the scale changes all the time, and that's a very important component of this particular setting. I want to go back to price and show you one specific thing here on this chart, and that is that the charting engine will always fill from the bottom to the top, and that's quite an important clue. And the reason I say that is, see how this scale is spread out here from 168 to 198. Well, when we roll back in time and add a few years to it, the scale changes. So the scale will always fill the range. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. And last thing, just to touch this off, is don't forget the log scale helps you on long time frames. It compresses it so percentage change at the end is about the same as the beginning. Okay, so let's get down here and talk about these different chart settings. There's lots of great ones in here. Lots of people like to use the candlesticks. Some people ask me why I don't. And I find these big black down bombs too emotional and not that great for my ballast. So I like to just be normal and have everything look the same, both up and down. And so, I mean, I still notice the big down drops, but the big thing is they're all presented at equal weight. So I think that's helpful. To me, that's a more stable look. It's whatever you prefer, though. So there's no right or wrong. It's really how you like to look at the charts. And again, what does a thick chart do? Well, you see the width on this data here. It's going to make these bars thicker so they show up more. And conversely, if you want them, if you want to use line data, and a high-low close bar just doesn't have the tick on the left-hand side, it only has the close. So that's the difference there. So it just puts it only cares about the close, so it puts the line all the way across and says this is where it finished for the day. It is not reflecting that the open is the same on every one of these charts. Okay. So now solid line, obviously, this one's important, and I want to show it to you in two different things here. I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. See this smooth line box here? If you have this unchecked, what will happen is your data will look pixely like this. And if you'd like it to be smoothed out, then just click this smooth line box, and that will help you. And then your data will have a nice, smooth, clean flow to it. So that's all that little checkbox is telling you, but it's really for line charts is where it works the best. And then different dashed lines, and obviously you can make them thick or thin. And on here, while you're processing these, I think the big thing that you want to watch for in this particular case is you want your data to stand out better than your moving averages. So that's usually an important factor, is try to make sure your moving averages are thinner than your data, or try to make sure that they're at least not overshadowing your data. And then the next component here, as we work our way down, dots is just exactly what it says. It's just a dotted at the close from every day. And of course, this doesn't look like a real trend in here, right? So the dots aren't that great for this type of analysis. Area charts. So an area chart, sometimes called a mountain chart, you can see when you turn it on, it comes on quite strong, so it fills this in maximum capacity. The way to tone this down so it looks normal is to go in here to opacity, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but you change it, and with this opacity it kind of says how clear do you want it, and if you say 0.1, then it's not going to show, it's not going to let that big black contrast come through. And then when you're working with the area chart, the one thing I find is I'll show you how to put a moving average on top of this, and that will give you a nice clean line at the very top so you can see it clearly. So that's an important little setting, I think, to make the chart show up better. But in general, 0.4 or 0.5 is kind of a normal level, so the chart is visible but not too blunt. And then nextly is the histogram. And what do we mean by the histogram? Of course, that's just these columns. And so it's basically going to mark where it closed on the day and just draw it down to the lowest level on the chart. When you look at an equivolume, this is a particular setting, and I believe it was from Dick Arms. And what happens here is it makes the candle wider based on the volume. And so this is a pretty important little tool. You can see this is like a hammer bottom, and this is like a lot of selling on the way down. Another hammer sort of bottom where big volume shows up. And then you can see other days here are quite thin, and those are less important, just based on emotion. But you can see all the way in this downtrend here, the volume was extra thick, so that's why these are so wide. And then up here, the volume was very, very light, and then all of a sudden expanded quickly. Okay, candle volume. When we look at that, this is just a regular candlestick chart, and now we vary the width based on the volume. And then the next component here is the arms candle volume. And what this does is it shows the high-low open and close, but it makes the candle go all the way up rather than having tails above and below the candle. And the idea behind that is it just shows that this was a big volume day, traded a wide range. The volume would look relatively insignificant if it was only for this portion. So this shows you that it was a big day, both vertically, volume wide, and it ended up closing down slightly from where it opened. So important little tricks. Those are just 3 different styles, and again, those came, I believe all 3 of those are Dick Arms, if I'm not mistaken. Heiken Ashi, 3-line break, Kagi, and Renko charts. All of these are different types of displays. I'm not going to get into them. You can go to the Chart School article and just catch, here's a 3-line break, but just put whatever you'd like in this box over here, and that'll explain them. I just don't want to stall the presentation based on one sort of chart style. Okay, so then these 3 different, I will say that I like the Renko chart. It takes out the volatility and it makes it relatively clean. You're either in a downtrend or an uptrend. And in this particular case, you would drop down 1, and it all depends on where you have your stop set. Is it below this low? And then with those tools, you can just try to ride the trend. So do you let it have a 1-box pullback? Do you let it have a 3-box pullback? What is your pullback limit? And so you can look at the charts here and go through the settings for those specifically. But you can decide how you want it to flip, and based on the ATR of 14, and then work through these settings. So you can read all about these in the chart school, but I want to just keep continuing on different types of charts here. Now, obviously, what do you think Invisible is going to do? It's going to make the data go away. Now, if you have the price labels box checked here, what will happen is you'll get these little boxes. If I uncheck that, you won't see those at all. And so now you have the moving averages showing and no data. So what's the general trend of this chart? Up and to the right. And the moving averages can tell you that. And obviously the long-term one is in green, and the more wiggly one is your shorter-term moving average. So the invisible chart data can help sometimes, especially when the data whipsaws a lot. I use it sometimes on my bullish percent indexes. And here's cumulative. And what cumulative data does is it adds the day's transaction to the previous day. And so in general, this is up and to the right. And if we just change this to oil as an example. So it's still going to look the same. A lot of times we use this for the advanced decline line. So, whoops, typing without being in the box here, dollar NAD. And what you see here is this, this is the cumulative setting, and you can see that the advanced decline line adds on to each other each day, and then it starts to pull back again. And so what you want to watch for, obviously, is an uptrend in advanced decline lines. So these are all just different settings. I want to go back to QQQ here just so that we're looking at a stock or something you can trade. And then performance chart, I mentioned this earlier. This is the line chart, and you can see it's quite simple. I have the opacity set so it's not very dark. If I want to make that line darker, I just make it a 1. And if I want to make that line lighter, I shrink it down. And again, you can choose the colors. So you can have it go down in red and up in black, and it will change your lines as well. You can do this for candles, for bars. So if we go back to a bar chart, it'll make my up bars black and my red bars down. You might have seen that display elsewhere. And then the other type of thing that you can look at here, so I've shown you the performance now, the Elder Impulse System. And what this is, Alexander Elder devised a system, and you can read about it in chart school, but essentially red is negative. The chart is working its way lower, and red and blue are kind of like a flashing light, blue or an orange light. So this is red or blue is down. Now you want a trend change. And when you get your trend change, in his system, you work 2 different time frames. So you need to know what it's doing on the weekly in order to invest in the daily, or you need to know what it's doing on the daily in order to invest on the 1-hour chart. But working through these different bar colors can help you. And again, this one's alternating between blue and green, blue and green, blue and green, and it finally goes red. Now you have to decide, do you want to get out? In this particular case, you got a little bit of extra juice at the top, but it ended up giving it all back anyway. So the point of the Alexander Elder colors is to help you with uptrend and downtrend. I think it's a pretty valuable tool. Okay, quickly to get on to the size issue here. One of the things about the charts when we change them, and I'm just going to set this up. So 520 gives you a certain chart shape. What I usually like to use for doing my blog articles is 900, and that will control this part. Doesn't include the zoom box over here on the right. It only includes the width of this. So when you're writing a Microsoft Word document or something and you want to include a chart, 900 is a good setting width-wise. Now, one of the things that will happen with this automated setting is it will also control the height of the box. Now, if you want that height of the box to always stay on your screen and you're going to add indicators and that type of thing, it will change the vertical height of the chart. And so you'll have to go into a custom chart size, which I'll show you in a second. To turn off this extra panel on the side, here's the zoom thumbnail. And so we turn it off and hit update, and this will go away. And what this zoom thumbnail does is it just shows us the last 18 bars on the side here. And sometimes you might see a little arrow pointing in at the exact value. So here in this case, it's 185 to 198. So it only shows in the zoom box the last 18 bars in here, takes that whole range, goes from the bottom, so from this red all the way up. And then if you want to have y-axis labels, what this does here is, I have to hit the update, it's going to put a label here telling you exactly the levels of the moving averages right on here. So rather than just having it in the zoom box, it's written over here on the right, and the actual price level. So it will identify those for you. Now, the other things that are down here, the price labels I mentioned earlier, and when you put that on, that's going to put these little boxes on the bottom that show you kind of reversal points. And then the full quote panel here is going to come in and show you the different types of detailed information on the stock. I like the scooter ranking, the dividend yield, what the dollar amount is, volume, all that type of information. So it's just a more expanded piece of data. Price earnings ratio, in this case it doesn't work because it's the QQQ, but if you had a stock like Apple or whatever, it would give you that data. Okay, solid candles. This is for when you're on. I'm just going to finish this off while I'm here. These tick boxes, and what happens is on candlestick, if you check the solid candles. It gets rid of one of the problems I have with candlesticks and makes them both filled in, and that's just a choice setting there, so you can toggle that on and off. Okay. I'll cover off the volume in just a little bit here because I'm going to do the volume separately. But now get back to size. So there's a whole bunch of different size. Portrait obviously is going to be what you'd think. It's a vertical chart. And then landscape, when we go there, is here. And looking at a landscape chart, it's quite obvious that we want to get the maximum distance out of this. Well, this is just going to default to a certain number of pixels. In order to get the actual size you want, I think the best way to do this is to change the width. And so what I like is if I'm doing a presentation on my screen, I like to set it out at 1250. And if I've got the zoom panel out here, it'll show me out to 1400. If I turn that off, then I would make the chart a little bit wider. So I would go out to whatever, 1500 or 1450. And that's going to fill it all the way out to the right hand side. So again, just utilizing the space. Now the other thing is the height, and I had set it at 440 before, and what that does is control this vertical distance. When I put the full quote panel on, it keeps the same measurement in terms of pixels from the bottom to the top. So if I take the zoom panel off, it will actually let my data get a little higher up. And then each indicator box I add, so if I add MACD or an RSI or something like that, that will take distance away out of this height limitation I've set. So when I set it at 750, which is a display height I like for my presentations, it uses most of the screen. Now if I put 5 or 6 indicators on there, it will compress the data and everything will stay within the 750. So those are just some methods. Again, one of my favorite chart settings on a lot of my defaults is either 1400 or 1250, depending on whether or not I have a zoom panel attached on the side. And so when you watch my presentations, normally you'll see the chart is out here filling most of the page. I don't want to get the data tight to the right over here, so give it a little bit of white space. But the idea being spread it out so that people can see what you're trying to show. When you do PowerPoint, you typically need a square. So something like 900, or it's not quite square, but you can get away with 1200 by 900 and then put that on your PowerPoint presentation. And when you do that, you can zoom it in or out, or as an example, you can go 900 and 600, but try to keep a ratio that allows you to fit it to your page. And then once you find the size that you like on your PowerPoint, you can use that size for every chart in your presentation. Okay. So kind of hustled through a couple of things here on size, but I think the big thing to remember, I like the custom setting, and once you start to use it, you'll probably get addicted to it. It's very helpful. Looking at the different backgrounds, one of the things I would encourage you to do whenever you're looking at your data is have a different background for each type. So as an example, in this particular case, here's my daily chart up here. This is a default. What you see on my daily default is I've got this brown border with this purple, and this purple is always compared to my S&P 500, but I've picked a particular chart style. Now when I go to my weekly chart, the whole thing changes and it looks different. When I go to my 30-minute chart, it's different again. And so you can set up these backgrounds so that they're different based on the time period you're looking at, and you can check them out. Now, I've added a couple of new time frames and they look a lot like this because they're in the Murphy. So here's the right hand, but I've put a ribbon through the middle of this, and I put more indicators on the bottom so my data gets shrunk down. But I would encourage you to try and set up your charts so that when you quickly flip between charts, you know whether you're on daily, weekly, monthly, hourly, that type of control. Okay, next I want to point out a couple of other things down in here. So all of these different color screens. You can play with them and see which ones you like. I will say that these work better when you look at them on your computer rather than through presentations. So I would keep that in mind depending on how you're using them. And if you don't like a lot of light coming at you, then this is like the dark mode that they've put on the iPhones and that kind of thing. So lots of people like that, but it doesn't share very well. Murphy, if you've ever seen a John Murphy chart, this is kind of his background setting. And you can always go through, and on the chart styles window down here at the bottom, a whole bunch of the default settings are in here. So here's Tom Bowley's chart style and how he likes to put all of his data together. And then if you wanted a Martin Pring or somebody else, you could go in here and grab it. I don't know if Prings is in here actually, but here's Chip Anderson, and so he's got this particular chart, and he's just showing you some variants that you can use here. But set them up the way you like them. Erin Heim, she has a one that's more in the plum down here. Nice colors. And then again, you can change the up and down color of what you like. I've explained the opacity already, which is the ability to change how dark the image is coming at the screen. And then all of these just change the grid in the background. So if you look back here and see the grid, you can make it look like engineering paper or whatever, and or you can turn it on to normal, or you can take it right off and you can set it up so that it's not there at all. You can just get rid of the background. All, again, trying to make you customize or help you customize the chart to the level of detail that you would like. I'm not sure I'm going to stay with Chip's look very long, so I'm going to go down here and pick a whole different color. As you can see, I've got a lot of different chart settings. Here's a Pring chart style that Martin likes to use. So working through these different settings, feel free to go grab some of these chart styles that are already in existence. You're allowed 50. I've filled them. I got all 50 going, I think. So anyway, lots of different variety in there. Okay, lastly, I want to wrap up with the volume. And what happens with the volume here is when I turn this on, the volume will show down here below. And I've got so much data here. Let's just clean this up and actually let's just quit hitting buttons here for a second. Let's go back to my daily chart style. And again, I can get to it from here. And that's going to pop up a chart. Okay, so I've got this chart. See how the volume is colored down here in the bottom? Well, if you don't want that, then you turn off color volume. And then that is going to make the volume, it doesn't care whether it's an up day or a down day. It only cares it just makes them all the same color. So that's a very simple setting. But the other point is when you put the volume up here, so this is, in this case, it's update, the volume is separate. What that means is it drops it down below, and then you might say, how come I have volume in both places? And the reason is because I've got the volume set up down here as an indicator. And so the issue that you're going to have is if you want to put a moving average on volume, like I have in this case, that's what this 50 in this box does. And I've said behind price, it will put a 50-day moving average on the volume. You can't do that with this volume up here. So again, the one thing that if you want to change the volume and be putting a moving average on it, you need to do it down here, and then you would just turn this part up here off. Okay, and so when you're working with the volume, those are two critical components that I think you want to make sure you stay within. Okay, so that was a dramatically quick work through of all the chart attributes. I hope I've helped you find some of the settings that you're always missing. Don't forget to use those extra bars on the right and give yourself a little bit more room. Thanks everybody for joining me. Have a great week. Bye-bye.